These are 100 of the most violent, gruesome, and disturbing video games ever made. I was planning to make this video with the intention of arranging the games from the least disturbing to the most, but they're all so extreme that I couldn't bring myself to put them in any order. 177. 177 was a side-scrolling arcade game developed and published by Macadamia Soft and released in 1986 for the NEC PC 8801 system. The game's title references the paragraph in the Japanese criminal code that prohibits sexual assault, ironically naming a game centrally focused on this violence. In 177, the player controls a male protagonist who chases a female character around a circuit, attempting to catch and sexually assault her. Hedges and dogs function as obstacles for the player, who can throw rocks at the fleeing woman to slow her down. The player loses if the woman reaches her home. If she is caught by the protagonist, the side-scrolling arcade mode shifts to a stationary overview of the sexual assault, during which the player must press various buttons in order to sexually satisfy the woman. If he is successful, they are married. If he fails, he is arrested by the police. Brownmouth. Brownmouth is a game very few people have played, since it was a game made for people that like to eat poop. Apparently, the website that had it is lost. In Brownmouth, you play as a deranged man who is disfigured named Mike Nasty. In the game, you must steal and drink tons of milk, which will fill the brown bar on the screen. When filled, he will have severe diarrhea. You can also kill anyone you come into contact with and eat them. His main goal seems to be to abduct little girls and tie them up in his home, where you must complete an action-timed game where he force feeds them his own feces, after which he will then cut them open and eat their insides, and finally snuggle with their empty bodies. Failing the event will cause a tumor in Mike's brain to grow and make the game harder to control. It is also possible to sell the girls and their body parts for money, which you can spend on explosives that Mike can use to cause mass killings. Mike also has a pet goat, which you can command to eat people. Outfits can be purchased for the goat, including a maid outfit, gimp suit, goth outfit, and others. Mike Nasty appears to have two friends in the game, Lucy Fillin and Richard Rectus. Both of them are hallucinations of Mike's mind. Lucy acts as a guide to instruct you on playing the game. It is also possible to have sex with her, which is an animated QuickTime event. Due to her being a hallucination, Mike uses a human flesh doll made up of small animals sewn together for the physical part of the encounter. Once complete, Mike will become faster, stronger, and earn more money for a limited time. Richard Rectus can also be interacted with to play a game of his. In the game, you must first inject chemicals into either Mike's eyes, neck, gums, or under his fingernails. Once done, you can go on a rampage. The goal is to skin as many people as possible in a certain amount of time, after which he will fashion the flesh into either a trophy or some BDSM gear, such as restraints, whips, belts, and so on, which can be used on young girls to cause them to urinate, which must be collected in jars. Once around 50 jars are filled, Mike can fulfill his final mission, invading the police station, after fighting off all officers using the jars of urine, which is thrown. You can take down the police chief, where you must complete a 5-minute long animated QuickTime event where you must pin down the chief and defecate inside his mouth. In the final scene, you are caught by one lone police officer, where you can choose to surrender or attack. Choosing to attack, Mike will detonate an explosive, destroying the entire station. Choosing to surrender makes the officer shoot you to death before shooting themselves. The final scene shows a statue built of Mike Nasty, which ranges from him being crucified to an entire museum dedicated to him, depending on how well you did in the game. Demonophobia. Despite being a simple-looking game, it boasts a violent and sexual direction beyond imagination and a gloomy background setting that makes one question the creator's mental state. The main character, Kunakai Sakuri, awoke one day to find herself in a dim, unfamiliar room. Stepping outside, she encountered menacing monsters prowling about. Caught in a trap, she met a swift demise, only to inexplicably return to life, compelled to press forward. The game producer's affection for Dot and Rayona elements shines through, with a focus on sadistic challenges and meticulous design. Each trap and encounter, including boss battles, offers unique and elaborate death sequences, a testament to the game's attention to detail. With no background music or sound effects, the player relies on text descriptions. Despite its simplistic 2D dot graphics, the game's file size is surprisingly large due to the multitude of death animations and sprites. However, this belies its low-end nature compared to modern mobile games. Gore is so extreme that it can be said to be far from gore. In particular, starting with Asmodeus, the 4th stage boss, the main character masturbates before the boss confrontation, or when he is hit and killed while sitting in a charge attack, when he is beaten by small slimes in 5th stage, or by Lucifer, the 6th stage boss. A typical example is the scene when the main body is hit by a falling ceiling attack and dies. In addition, from stage 6, Kunakai Sakuri suddenly loses her clothes and goes around naked. As an ordinary schoolgirl, Kunakai lacks combat prowess, making avoidance crucial. Yet the game's challenging controls, bugs, and unforgiving save points elevate the difficulty to near impossible levels. In some instances, defeating a boss only leads to unforeseen setbacks, requiring a forced reset. Ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing, also known as Ethnic Cleansing the Game, emerged in 2002 as a controversial first-person shooter developed by the National Alliance, an American white supremacist and neo-Nazi group. In this game, players take the role of one of 3 selectable characters, including a Ku Klux Klan member and a neo-Nazi skinhead. Their objective is to navigate through 2 levels, targeting stereotypical representations of African Americans, Latinos, and Jews. Released on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 2002 through the National Alliance's record label Resistance Records, the game garnered widespread condemnation from anti-hate organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, regarded as one of the most controversial and racially charged video games. The game's premise revolves around a race war, allowing players to select from characters representing white supremacist groups. Enemies in the game are depicted as ethnic minorities portrayed with racial stereotypes. Upon defeating them, the game features offensive stereotypes such as black characters making monkey noises, Jews shouting oy vey, and Latinos exclamating stereotypical phrases like ay caramba. The game consists of 2 levels, with the first set in an urban environment where players encounter Latino and black enemies, including a character named Big N-Word. The second level takes place in a subway, portrayed as the hideout of Jews aspiring for global dominance. The final boss is depicted as Ariel Sharon, the former Prime Minister of Israel, who attacks the player with a rocket launcher. Ethnic Cleansing was developed and released by the National Alliance, described as the largest and most active neo-Nazi organization in the United States. The chairman of the National Alliance, Sean Walker, stated that the game's purpose was to be racially provocative. It was marketed as the most politically incorrect video game ever made and utilized the Genesis 3D game engine for development. Despite receiving negative backlash, the game sold several thousand copies upon its release in January 2002, distributed through Resistance Records' website. Lolita Syndrome. Lolita Syndrome is a Japanese adult computer game. It was the winner of Enix's second biannual Game Hobby Program contest. The game takes place within a house called Mice and Lolita, where underage cartoon girls run around without clothes and play games which involve cheating death. The player must solve puzzles in order to save the cartoon girls from violent deaths, or to see the girls without their clothes on. The game was not originally advertised as containing gore, and this element was only hinted at on the game's packaging. The game opens showing 5 doors at Mice and Lolita. The player selects one of these 5 rooms to enter, with each containing a different minigame. Buzzsaw Room. In this room, a girl is strapped to a table, and a circular buzzsaw is slowly moving towards her. The player must choose the correct key from 10 keys in order to release the girl, and is limited to 5 guesses. After 5 incorrect guesses, the buzzsaw slices the girl, who explodes into a fountain of gore and dies. If the player is successful in freeing the girl, she takes off her clothes. Human Dartboard Room. In this room, a girl is strapped to a dartboard, and the player is to toss darts at her. The player selects a series of darts which are randomly allocated by number. Success is determined randomly by the computer depending on which number the player selects. If the player wins, the girl's clothing is removed. Otherwise, the girl explodes into gore and dies. Password Room. In this room, a sleeping girl is lying on a bed, and the player must type a Japanese word in order to wake her up and have her take her clothes off. The game provides hints to the player. Rock, Paper, Scissors Room. In this room, the player plays a game of rock, paper, scissors against a girl, who removes a piece of her clothing each time the player wins. Gallery Room. The final room does not contain a game, but rather a gallery where the player can view pornographic images of underage cartoon girls. Sad Satan. Sad Satan is a disturbing horror video game purportedly released for Microsoft Windows in 2015 by an anonymous creator known only as ZK from the dark web. Players navigate dimly lit corridors in first-person view, encountering intermittent flashes of full-screen images. The game lacks clear goals or win conditions. Two versions of Sad Satan exist. The original, showcased on the YouTube channel Obscure Horror Corner, and the later clone version, which gained notoriety for its extremely graphic imagery, including mutilated corpses and CP. In the original version, players navigate monochromatic corridors while audio samples, including interviews with murderers like Charles Manson, play in the background. Images intermittently disrupt gameplay, referencing themes of child abuse and crime, with figures like Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris depicted. The clone version closely mimics gameplay but features even more disturbing imagery, including photographs of mutilated corpses and, in the earliest build, instances of CP. The game's history includes its initial upload to Obscure Horror Corner in June 2015, with subsequent clone releases surfacing on platforms like 4chan and Reddit. Sad Satan was the last game covered by Obscure Horror Corner, and since then, the YouTube channel has been abandoned. There has been speculation that the game was in fact created by the owner of Obscure Horror Corner in an effort to increase viewer subscription count. LostBoy.exe. LostBoy.exe is an independent game that was published on X and V, 4chan's boards on August 22, 2012. It became infamous after a malicious user took advantage of its emerging popularity to hack other Anons, which caused panic for several days on the forum. A few hours later, someone else other than the OP started mass sharing a different link, or an embedded JPEG, also claiming to be LostBoy.exe. In reality, it was a rat malware and some Anons were tricked to download it, thus giving remote access of their computer to this hacker. If downloaded, no game would appear, and the backdoor malware would steal their personal data, credit cards, phone numbers, etc. The hacker gathered all of it in a paste bin page and leaked it on the same V and X boards. It still remains to be confirmed if he took other actions, like taking photographs via their webcam or remote desktop searching for inappropriate stuff. When the list of stolen data was shared, people used it to try to warn hackers of the situation by sending emails. The threads related to the game were deleted around this time. On August 28th, a sticky post was made by admins to remind Anons not to download anything from 4chan. Except for a handful of people, the link to the original game was lost since there was confusion because of the game and the malware. This event could have led to the permanent ban of embedded images on 4chan. The first gameplay was made by YouTuber Saint in 2014, but he made no mention of its backstory. It recently regained interest after a French YouTuber, Felled Up, interviewed the creator of LostBoy.exe in May 2023. Even to this day, some people claim these footages to be a recreation or confuse it with other obscure games like Station.exe and Sad Satan. Hong Kong 97. Hong Kong 97, released back in 1995 by the indie studio Happysoft, is known for its offbeat story and gameplay. It was created in just a week by Kowloon Kurosawa, a Japanese game journalist, with a little help from a friend. It's 1997. And the tensions are high as Hong Kong is about to switch hands from the British to the Chinese. In the game, you play as Chin, who's like a superpowered version of Bruce Lee. The Hong Kong government ropes Chin in to deal with a rise in crime blamed on immigrants from mainland China. But things take a wild turn when a supposedly deceased guy named Tong Xiaoping gets brought back to life by the Chinese government. As for the gameplay, it's all about Chin shooting down hordes of enemies coming at him. There's a mix of weird power-ups and obstacles, like exploding enemies and cars zooming across the screen, and visually, it's a mishmash of images from Maoist propaganda to familiar logos set against a backdrop of China. The game's soundtrack is just one catchy tune on repeat, I Love Beijing Tiananmen, and there aren't many sound effects to speak of, which adds to the game's quirky vibe. Depictions of characters and events within the game exhibit a deliberate skew towards exaggeration, evident in the portrayal of Chin and the derogatory language used to describe mainland Chinese immigrants. Despite its short development time and low sales, Hong Kong 97 has become a bit of a cult classic. People love it for its absurdity, even though critics often rank it among the worst games ever made. It is often regarded as an example of so bad, it's good. My Lolita. My Lolita is a medical simulation, albeit with the added twisted emphasis on undressing an underage girl. The game consists of several scenes during which the player controls a machine arm that can move in 4 directions as well as grab and release objects. This arm is used for undressing the girl and for all the other procedures such as measuring temperature, taking blood and urine samples, vaccinations, etc. The player has to manipulate the arm to the correct spots of the girl's body to execute these procedures. Some of them must be completed within a time limit. Afterwards, it is necessary to make the correct diagnosis based on the results and administer the correct medicine. Failure to do so leads to game over. The Song of Saya. The Song of Saya is a horror-themed visual novel developed by NitroPlus, featuring an ero-gay format. The original storyline was penned by Gen Urobuchi, who drew inspiration from the works of H.P. Lovecraft during a particularly isolating period in his life. The popularity of The Song of Saya also spawned a 3-issue comic book adaptation by IDW Publishing, titled Song of Saya, which hit the shelves between February and April 2010. However, this westernized interpretation received criticism for straying from the source material's essence and glossing over its darker themes. As for the plot, it follows the journey of Fuminori Sakisaka, a young medical student whose life takes a turn following a car accident. Afflicted with a side effect from head injury and subsequent brain surgery, Fuminori perceives the world and its inhabitants as grotesque monstrosities. His encounter with Saya, a seemingly innocent girl who appears beautiful to him amidst the horror, leads to an unconventional and disturbing relationship. As the story unfolds, Fuminori's descent into darkness is marked by increasingly disturbing events, including murder and cannibalism. Choices made throughout the narrative determine the outcome, leading to various endings ranging from unsettling to outright tragic. Standoff. The game portrays a scenario of a school shooting, allowing players to take the roles of the active shooter, referred to as the attacker on the title screen, a SWAT team member responding to the crisis, or a civilian who can opt to either flee or confront the assailant. In the attacker role, players can employ firearms, grenades, or knives, with the game keeping track of civilian, guard, and police casualties on screen. Controversy surrounding active shooter erupted upon its debut on the Steam store in May 2018. Parents of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting victim swiftly mobilized against the game, gathering 100,000 signatures on an online petition that ultimately led to its cancellation. The situation took a turn when it was revealed on May 29th that Revived Games and Acid Publishing Group were aliases for Anton Makarivsky and Ada Berdyev, previously ousted from Steam for copyright infringement, and was described as a troll with a history of misconduct. Amid mounting criticism, Valve, the platform's operator, announced a review of its content policies. Subsequently, on June 6, 2018, Valve updated its policy, stipulating that content would be permissible unless deemed illegal or constituted trolling. Active Shooter was singled out as a prime example of such trolling, designed to provoke outrage. The fallout was swift. PayPal terminated Acid Software's account, Indiegogo removed the title from its platform, and Bluehost shut down the developer's websites. Super Columbine Massacre RPG. Super Columbine Massacre RPG is a controversial role-playing video game released in April 2005 by Danny Ledon. It reenacts the tragic 1999 shootings at Columbine High School in Colorado, with players taking the roles of the gunmen Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Ledon's creation sparked widespread condemnation for its depiction of the massacre and its aftermath. Danny Ledon, inspired by his own experiences with bullying and the impact of the Columbine shooting, conceptualized the game as a critique of media sensationalism and a reflection on societal issues. Using RPG Maker 2000, Ledon spent about 6 months crafting the game's narrative and mechanics, researching real events and incorporating them into the storyline. Players control Harris and Klebold, navigating through the school environment and engaging in battles with enemies. Combat options include hand-to-hand combat, explosives, and firearms. Flashbacks provide insight into the characters' motivations and experiences, while the game's graphics, reminiscent of 16-bit era games, juxtapose the violence portrayed. The game begins on the day of the shootings, following Harris and Klebold as they plant bombs and carry out their attack on the school. After their suicides, the narrative shifts to a fictional depiction of the shooters in hell, encountering various characters from pop culture and history. The game culminates in a press conference addressing the aftermath of the massacre, touching on issues like gun control and media sensationalism. Super Columbine Massacre RPG faced widespread criticism for its portrayal of sensitive subject matter. Victims' families and media outlets condemned it as insensitive and exploitative. The Story of Kamoshiki Village. The Story of Kamoshiki Village is a Japanese Dujin resource management strategy game based on the Aum Shinrikyo cult and the infamous 1995 Tokyo subway sarin gas attack. Developed by Happysoft and published by Omsoft, the game was released for PC 98 on June 29, 1995. Contrary to common misconception, the game portrays Shinrikyo and the sarin gas attack in a negative light, using real-life and animated footage to mock its members and the media coverage surrounding the events. In the game, players take the role of Shoko Asahara, the leader of the Shinrikyo cult, tasked with managing the cult's operations, gathering resources, and recruiting new members to ultimately execute the sarin gas attack. Time progresses as players perform various actions, with the game beginning on October 1st, 1989, and events such as the Sakamoto family murders and the Matsumoto sarin gas attack occurring on specific dates regardless of player input. Kamoshiki Village offers two possible endings: success in carrying out the sarin gas attack, or facing Armageddon if the player fails. Gameplay involves training Asahara's abilities, conducting missionary work, soliciting money from followers, investing resources, and taking rests strategically. Despite speculation suggesting that the game was created as propaganda by Shinrikyo, it is actually a product of satire, aiming to ridicule the cult rather than promote its ideology. The game features real-life footage of cult members obtained from news broadcasts following the attack, portraying them in a negative light. An advertisement for the game explicitly disclaims any affiliation with Shinrikyo and mocks notable members of the cult. Rapeplay. Rapeplay is a controversial 3D eroge video game developed by Illusion and released in Japan on April 21, 2006. The game stirred international attention and controversy due to its graphic content and themes. In Rapeplay, players take the role of Masuya Kimura, a chikan, a term for a person who engages in public sexual harassment, who stalks and sexually assaults members of the Kiryu family, consisting of a mother and her two daughters. The gameplay involves controlling Masuya as he commits acts of sexual assault against the three women in the Kiryu family. The story mode follows Masuya's criminal activities, including stalking, groping, and ultimately sexually assaulting the three female characters. After completing the story mode, players unlock a free play mode where they can engage in consensual sexual encounters with the same characters. The plot unfolds as Masuya targets each member of the Kiryu family, starting with the youngest daughter, Manaka, whom he lures into a public bathroom and assaults. He then proceeds to target the mother, Yuko, and finally the elder daughter, Aoi. Masuya's actions escalate, culminating in the abduction and confinement of the entire family. The game offers two possible endings, both resulting in Masuya's death. In the black ending, Masuya impregnates one of the women and later dies in a subway accident. In the red ending, Aoi, the elder daughter, retaliates against Masuya by stabbing him to death, resulting in her being questioned by the police for his murder. Muslim Massacre. Muslim Massacre, the game of modern religious genocide, is a controversial top-down shoot-'em-up video game released in 2008 by a forum member Eric Vaughn under the screen name Sigvatter. The game garnered significant attention and sparked controversy due to its theme and gameplay, which involves killing Muslims. In the game, players take the role of an American soldier parachuted into the Middle East armed with various weapons, including pistols, shotguns, machine guns, hand grenades, and rocket launchers. The objective is to eliminate all the Muslims depicted on screen, including civilians and stereotypical terrorists wearing suicide vests. Critical reception of the game varied. Some reviewers found it to be mechanically weak and devoid of meaningful content, while others appreciated its retro-style visuals and music. Despite mixed reviews, Muslim Massacre gained significant popularity with over 100,000 downloads by April 2008. However, the game also attracted widespread condemnation and controversy. Critics labeled it as vile, tasteless, and offensive, accusing it of promoting violence against Muslims and exacerbating anti-Muslim prejudice. Muslim organizations and community leaders called for the game to be banned and urged government authorities and internet providers to take action against its distribution. While the game faced backlash and calls for censorship, legal action was limited due to jurisdictional issues and the decentralized nature of online content. Some efforts were made to report the game to authorities and regulatory bodies, but they faced challenges in addressing the issue effectively. Blue Whale. Blue Whale, also known as the Blue Whale Challenge, emerged as a social network phenomenon in 2016, purportedly spanning several countries. It's described as a game involving a series of tasks administered by designated administrators over a 50-day period. Initially, these tasks are innocuous but progressively escalate to include self-harm, culminating in a final challenge where the player is instructed to take their own life. The concept gained attention following a 2016 article in the Russian newspaper Novaya Gazeta, associating numerous child suicides with participation in a VK social network group labeled F57. This sparked concern, leading to a wave of moral panic in Russia. However, investigations found no direct causal link between the suicides and the group's activities, challenging the initial narrative. Despite claims of suicides linked to the game worldwide, none have been conclusively confirmed. Some countries, including Egypt, Kenya, and Pakistan, have reportedly banned the game, although experts note the challenges in effectively prohibiting it. The origin of Blue Whale traces back to a Russian teenager's suicide in November 2015, which sparked discussions online and eventually evolved into a series of online folklore and scare stories. Journalist Galina Mersalayeva's article in April 2016 shed light on these death groups on VK, alleging their involvement in numerous suicides. However, critiques of the article highlighted the lack of credible data and balanced reporting. The name Blue Whale has uncertain origins, with some associating it with a song by the Russian rock band Lumen, while others interpret it as a metaphor for beaching, where whales become stranded and perish. Participants engage with the game through various social media platforms, with an administrator assigning daily tasks over a 50-day period. These tasks start innocently, but gradually escalate to include self-harm. Contrary to initial fears of predatory adults, investigations reveal that administrators were often children themselves, drawn to the sensationalized narrative. Root Pain WAD. In Zdoom forums in 2013, one user, Zygo, stood out for his fascination with horror games, particularly those exploring psychological depths like Silent Hill. This interest wasn't unusual in the community, where requests for mods with similar themes were common. Zygo had been working on a mod called Possessed, until it was cancelled due to lost progress. Then, in April 2013, he released a short-lived WAD called Classic Rivalry, which aimed to rival another popular project but faced heavy criticism. But it was Root Pain, Zygo's mysterious creation, that truly captured the community's imagination. Its forum posts contained nothing but a logo and a cryptic message, inviting users to delve into the unknown. Players reported feeling disturbed and losing sleep after experiencing the mod, setting the stage for a chilling tale. Entering Root Pain, players found themselves in a grotesque, fleshy environment reminiscent of the living creature's insides. The absence of traditional HUD elements intensified the sense of disorientation. There were no enemies, switches, or doors, just pulsating walls and eerie ambient sounds. As players delved deeper into the mod, they discovered a disturbing revelation. They were inside a womb, tasked with destroying ovaries. Each destruction triggered violent shakes and agonized screams. The climax came in the form of a monstrous fetus symbolizing an abortion, triggering a cacophony of disturbing sounds before crashing the game. Further exploration uncovered hidden messages within the mod, including references to abortion and a mysterious numeric code. Speculations ran wild among forum users, ranging from Zygo's psychological state to the meaning behind the encrypted message. Despite the speculation, Zygo remained silent, never responding to inquiries or engaging with the community. Harvester. Harvester, a 1996 point-and-click adventure game written and directed by Gilbert P. Austin, is renowned for its exploration of violence, disturbing content, and psychological themes. Players take the role of Steve Mason, an 18-year-old who awakens in the peculiar town of Harvest, circa 1953, with no memory of his past and a sense of unease about his surroundings. Learning that he's set to be married in 2 weeks, Steve goes to meet his supposed fiancée, Stephanie Potsdam, the daughter of Mr. Potsdam, an unemployed man who hopes to get a job alongside Steve's father working in Harvester's meatpacking plant, and who openly expresses his lust for his own daughter. Meeting Stephanie, Steve finds that she, too, has amnesia, and woke up the same morning as him with no idea how she got to Harvest. The two form an alliance to figure out their past and escape the town. Steve visits the sergeant at Arms at the Lodge, who tells him that all of his questions will be answered inside the building, and sets about giving him a series of tasks that serve as initiation rites. Over the course of the next week, Steve is given a new task each day, beginning with petty acts of vandalism that quickly escalate to theft and arson, with each task having unforeseen, tragic circumstances that usually result in someone's accidental death, murder, or suicide. Meanwhile, driven by their mutual fear and reliance on one another, Steve and Stephanie become lovers. On the final day of his initiation, Steve discovers a mutilated skull and spinal cord in Stephanie's bed, which the sergeant-at-arms tells him is his invitation to the lodge. Venturing inside, Steve discovers that the lodge is composed of a series of rooms called temples, which serve as mordant burlesques of real civic locations, including a living room with a dead family and a kitchen where a chef prepares human meat, and whose inhabitants challenge him with a series of puzzles, ostensibly meant to teach lessons integral to understanding the precepts of the lodge. Each lesson turns out to be an aversion of traditional morality, including the futility of charity, the uselessness of the elderly, and the benefits of lust and vanity. At the highest level of the lodge, the sergeant-at-arms presents a still-living Stephanie and explains that Harvest is an elaborate virtual reality simulator being operated by a group of scientists in the 1990s to determine if it's possible to turn average humans into serial killers. Steve and Stephanie are the only real people in the simulation, and everything Steve has experienced has been intended to warp his reality and break down his inhibitions to prepare him for life as a serial killer. The sergeant offers him two options: murder Stephanie, committing his first real crime and accepting a future as a murderer, or refuse, in which case the scientists will render both Steve and Stephanie brain dead in the laboratory. Should Steve choose the second option, the sergeant informs him he and Stephanie will live an entire lifetime of happiness in the Harvest Simulator in the seconds before their death. If the player chooses to kill Stephanie, Steve beats Stephanie to death and then removes her skull and spinal cord. After the murder is complete, Steve awakens within the virtual reality simulator. Hitchhiking home, he brutally murders the driver who picks him up. Steve returns home and laughs as the camera enters his throat and stomach, revealing dissolving body parts of the driver he killed earlier. If the player chooses to spare Stephanie, the sergeant-at-arms performs an impromptu wedding in the chapel before letting the pair go. Steve and Stephanie buy a home, have a child, and grow old together before dying peacefully and being buried in the Harvest Cemetery. In real life, the scientists express disappointment at the results of their experiment as they look on at the pair's dead bodies. Hatred. Hatred is an isometric shoot-'em-up game developed and published by Destructive Creations, released on June 1st, 2015 for Microsoft Windows. The game puts players in control of a misanthropic mass killer known as the Antagonist, who embarks on a ruthless genocide crusade to eradicate humanity. Set in a grim and violent world, Hatred serves as a reaction to prevailing video game aesthetic trends, eschewing political correctness and vivid color in favor of a dark and brutal atmosphere. The game's announcement trailer in October 2014 sparked controversy due to its extreme violence, leading to its temporary removal from Steam Greenlight by Valve. However, following a personal apology from Valve's co-founder Gabe Newell, Hatred was reinstated and eventually released on June 1st, 2015. Gameplay in Hatred revolves around relentless mayhem and destruction, presented from an isometric perspective. Players navigate various environments as the antagonist, armed with an arsenal of weapons and grenades. The objective is simple: kill as many people as possible. Health is restored by performing executions on incapacitated victims, adding a cinematic element to the violence. The game's plot follows the antagonist's descent into madness as he embarks on a killing spree in New York City. From his neighborhood to One Police Plaza and beyond, he leaves a trail of destruction, targeting civilians and law enforcement alike. As the body count rises, the antagonist's ultimate goal becomes clear: to trigger a catastrophic explosion at a nuclear power plant, annihilating millions of people and achieving his twisted vision of retribution against society. Postal 1. Postal 1, known as Going Postal in Europe and Postal Going Over the Edge in the Netherlands and Germany, is the inaugural installment in the Postal series. Developed by Running with Scissors and Ripcord Games, the game was released in November 1997. Notorious for its controversial content as a mass murder simulator, Postal was banned in over 10 countries upon release. The game's plot revolves around an ordinary man known only as the Postal Dude, who finds himself in the midst of chaos after a mind-altering substance infects the town of Paradise, driving its inhabitants to insanity and bloodlust. Facing eviction from his home amidst the madness, the Postal Dude embarks on a mission to quell the chaos, believing it originates from a nearby Air Force base. As players progress through the game, the Postal Dude experiences a psychotic episode, attempting to attack a group of elementary school children during recess. However, he realizes his weapons are ineffective against them, suggesting his own descent into madness. Subsequently, he is presumably captured and incarcerated in a mental institution. The gameplay of Postal is presented in an isometric shooter format, featuring levels set in both 3-4 and top-down perspectives. The primary objective in each level is to eliminate a specified number of enemies, referred to as hostiles, who range from police officers to SWAT teams. Additionally, players have the option to kill unarmed civilians with no reward or punishment for doing so. The game offers weapon and health pickups throughout levels to aid players in combat. Splatter School. Splatter School is a 2D side-scrolling game where the player plays an ordinary high school girl named Jessica. She took an after-school nap in a classroom one day and was awoke by the fire alarm. When she exits the classroom to see what has happened, she sees that her classmates has been killed by monsters. Armed only with a box cutter, Jessica must now escape the school. When Jessica is wounded, she will lose a piece of clothing until she is naked. When she only has one hit point left, the next time she is wounded will either mean that she is sexually assaulted or killed. In any case, it is game over. The game consists of 5 levels, with an end-of-level boss at the end of each level. Fun. Fun is a very edgy game which tells a tale about having sex with your dead mother. This game also includes graphic imagery and a repulsive feeling. The game is disgusting and not even well put together. It's just some long hallway with text and jacked up pictures. And then there's of course real messed up pictures, extremely horrifying, disturbing content, and badly made models. Euphoria. Euphoria is a Japanese extreme eroge visual novel developed by ClockUp and first released on June 24, 2011 for Microsoft Windows. The game's plot revolves around 6 students and a teacher who awaken in a mysterious white room and are compelled to partake in cruel games involving sexual assault and torture, under the threat of execution. It gained notoriety for its extreme cruelty, with many players expressing a regret for playing it due to its excessive brutality. Gameplay in Euphoria is described by the developers as an immoral hardcore ADV. The HD remaster version of the game allows players to toggle the display of various elements, such as cut-in effects, grotesque scenery, scat, or orgasm faces. A bonus section menu becomes available after completing at least one route, allowing players to view unlocked scenes, gallery images, and staff comments. The protagonist, Kisuke Takato, wakes up in a clinical facility and tries to investigate while encountering his schoolmates and a female teacher. They are informed by a robotic voice that they must participate in a sexual assault game, with Kisuke designated as the unlocker and the females as keyholes. Refusal to participate results in torture and death. As the game progresses, Kisuke faces choices that determine the plot's development, with 5 different expanded plots possible based on the chosen girl for each turn. After completing the rape game, Kisuke attempts to escape the facility and save the others from deadly challenges. Depending on the chosen route, the plot unfolds further, revealing the true history of the characters. Key characters include Nimu and Kanai, with Nimu orchestrating a nightmare of sexual assault and death at the school. Choosing Nimu's path leads to a tragic end for both her and Kisuke, while Kanai's route unveils the truth behind the facility's game and its participants. The game's multiple plots cross-reference each other, gradually revealing the full horrific story behind the death game. To access Kanai's route, commonly known as the true ending, one of the other routes must be completed. Reading all other girls' routes provides additional context for the true ending, but it is not mandatory. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a 1995 point-and-click adventure horror game based on Harlan Ellison's short story of the same name. Developed by Cyberdreams and the Dreamers Guild, the game was co-designed by Ellison himself and published by Cyberdreams, with distribution by MGM Interactive. Set in a dystopian world, the game follows 5 remaining humans who have been kept alive and tortured for over a century by a malevolent artificial intelligence called AM. Gameplay in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream involves players navigating through each character's metaphorical adventure, which is based on their fatal flaws. The player interacts with the game by making decisions through ethical dilemmas, dealing with issues such as insanity, sexual assault, paranoia, and genocide. The game uses the Sega game engine created by the Dreamers Guild, allowing players to direct characters' actions through a sentence-based interface and manage their spiritual barometer, which affects the outcome of the final adventure. The plot of the game revolves around AM, a sentient supercomputer that has destroyed humanity and kept 5 individuals alive to torture them for over a century. Each of the 5 victims is subjected to a personalized psychodrama designed by AM, playing into their greatest fears and personal failings. However, as the characters confront their past actions and redeem themselves, they ultimately prevail over AM's tortures. With the help of the Russian and Chinese supercomputers, one of the 5 humans is translated into binary and enters AM's mind to confront the malevolent AI. The game's ending offers multiple outcomes, depending on the player's actions and choices throughout the game. Despite being commercially unsuccessful, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream received critical acclaim and won awards for its adaptation of linear media into a video game. It is praised for its profound storytelling, high production values, and exploration of ethical dilemmas. However, its release was marred by censorship in certain countries due to its Nazi themes, and the game was restricted for players under the age of 18. The Insanity. The Insanity is a hybrid action point-and-click horror adventure game designed for both casual point-and-click gamers and fans of franchises like Resident Evil, Dead Space, and Silent Hill. Originally planned for release in the NG Halloween competition, the game's launch was delayed due to a sponsorship deal conflict with the NG banner requirement. The game begins with the player waking up in a room within a horrifying and gore-infested house. Covered in bandages, the player's identity is a mystery to all, including themselves. As they attempt to escape, they discover that the house is the lair of a maniacal ex-chief of surgery known as the Doctor. This psychotic individual now spends his days experimenting with a dark and abhorred surgical art, vivisection, the gruesome practice of combining human and animal limbs. The player realizes they are the latest victim of his twisted experiments. The themes explored in The Insanity are deeply disturbing, featuring vivid and unsettling imagery of horror and gore. Let's play with Coco-chan. The game starts with Coco-chan being abducted from a playground by a kidnapper who coerces her into participating in increasingly egregious activities as the storyline advances. As the game progresses, Coco-chan becomes pregnant, and the climax of the story is marked by the perpetration of the most unsettling and abhorrent acts upon her. Female Body Frenzy. The Female Body Frenzy series is a collection of Japanese adult-themed visual novels known for exploring the unsettling theme of human body modification. Developed by Walcure, these games delve into dark narratives that revolve around characters undergoing extreme physical transformations. The first installment, Female Body Frenzy 1, This Is the Body I Wanted, was released on August 22, 2008. It follows the story of a protagonist afflicted with an incurable disease who seeks out a doctor to cure her illness through radical body modification. Players navigate through varied endings, some of which result in drastic changes to the protagonist's body. The true ending is unlocked after completing all scenarios, revealing a compelling conclusion to the narrative. Its sequel, Female Body Frenzy 2 Exploding Virgin, debuted on May 18, 2011, which continued the theme of extreme body transformations. This installment focuses on the protagonist's lover undergoing body modification to save her life. With themes of love, sacrifice, and graphic imagery, players encounter varied endings, including one where the protagonist becomes a human storage warehouse. Released on December 26, 2014, Female Body Frenzy 3, Chaos Body, marks the series' 10th anniversary. This installment introduces Himika, who seeks revenge on the masked driver for destroying the King of Chaos. Unfolding a narrative interconnected with previous games, it ties up loose ends while featuring explicit and disturbing scenes, including rough treatment of characters by the Doctor. Yukin no Yakata. The protagonist in this game has an inherited power to subdue wills, even of the toughest politicians and bureaucrats. He uses this power to confine a number of women in his mansion and applies slavery training. Awaking. It's difficult to find the plot of this game, but it's a rape-a-thon with incest and scat, a prequel to some kind of corporate sex slave game. Wife Capture Labyrinth. This RPG tells a story of a girl belonging to a race where virginity is the greatest trait of pride. She travels to a labyrinth which she must complete to undo a curse that she has. This labyrinth only is accessible to women and changes shape depending on the repressed desires of the one who enters. The gameplay is simpler than other RPGs, since there is no system of levels, equipment, weapons, etc. What determines your strength is pride, which is obtained by winning battles or talking to some NPCs. But if instead you lose against an enemy, it decreases, in addition to resulting in being sexually assaulted, which brings negative effects such as more curses. When you lose several times, an enemy will accumulate curses to a point where combat abilities will be removed and replaced by submission. Another important aspect of the game is the dialogue with the NPCs, since they give you information about the enemies of the labyrinth as well as their behavior. The dialogues with the NPCs will depend on the curses you have, as well as how many of them you've accumulated. As the story progresses, some NPCs begin to leave notes. These NPCs are important, as talking to certain NPCs triggers special events with the heroine. The erotic scenes are unlocked mostly by defeating the heroine with certain enemies and on repeated occasions. There are also scenes that are activated by talking with a certain NPC and with a certain curse. These scenes consist of a static image with slight modifications to the face when the climax is reached. In addition, this scene is accompanied by a pseudo voice actor that focuses more on the moans of the heroine. There are a variety of fetishes, but the majority consist of sexual assaults and sexual attacks by tentacles. There is an option in the bathroom collection to activate all the scenes in case you just want to see the scenes and not struggle unlocking them the traditional way. Chronobox. For the most part, this virtual novel is pretty normal, except for the end of each route where you get brutally murdered, and apparently the ending reveals it was all a simulation created to torture your evil second personality, which has killed your girlfriend at her request. The girls murdering you in the simulation are recreations of her bullies who drove her to assisted suicide. An eternal answering machine. It has been 2 months since Kazama Kazutoshi began his service as a PE teacher at Regataki Academy. He had lost his wife half a year ago due to an accident and kept raising his single daughter by himself. One day, Kazutoshi's grandfather gets into an accident that leaves his body heavily bruised and he becomes unable to move. Kazutoshi is about to take his grandfather into his own custody, but is met with stubborn resistance. Kazutoshi has no choice but to nurse his injured grandfather until he can move by himself again. His daughter also recognizes the necessity. However, his daughter finally was able to find some friends at her school and doesn't want to be separated from the life she had built up until now, which leaves Kazutoshi with a dilemma. Not to mention that he neither has friends, co-workers, nor close relatives he can contact about this. The situation makes him lament his difficulties to socialize with others. But at that time, in an unexpected turn of events, he encounters a doctor named Ogata Saishiro. After hitting some booze with him, Kazutoshi comes to the conclusion that, quote, this guy can be trusted, unquote, and implores whether he could care about his daughter for a short time while he is absent. Ogata turns out to be the managing body of the school Kazutoshi works at, contributes to supporting him financially, moves out of his current housing, and then proceeds to rent an apartment right next to Kazutoshi's. All these gestures make Kazutoshi largely grateful. However, there is something that Kazutoshi didn't notice about Ogata. Ogata Saishiro is one of the world's most heinous individuals, and the protagonist of this story as well. And that is how Kotoko's Eternal House Sitting begins. This is all I could dig up about the game, but you can totally picture how it's going to unfold. Fraternite. Fraternite is an erotic game with a heavy emphasis on storytelling and complex character development. It's lauded for its deep exploration of human emotions, dark themes, and morally complex situations. The protagonist, Taichi, stands out as one of the most morally upright characters in the realm of eroge protagonists. His journey begins with a desire to help his sister, who has been assaulted. Throughout the story, Taichi remains steadfast in his commitment to protecting his sister and seeking justice for her, despite facing numerous challenges and moral dilemmas along the way. The narrative delves into themes of trauma, manipulation, and the consequences of human evil. Taichi's pursuit of understanding, even turning to literature on mind control and cult behavior, adds layers to his character and the story's depth. The dynamic between Taichi and his sister Mio is portrayed with complexity, despite an unsettling early scene of sexual assault by Mio. The game doesn't shy away from depicting the darkness within human nature, but it also doesn't blame the victims for their suffering or the actions they take as a result. There is excessive focus on sexual content in the game, noting that it can be difficult to sit through. The game's themes and depictions are deeply disturbing and may not be suitable for everyone. I love you, so I want to kill you. The character Yumi is dangerously obsessed with Subaru. Her feelings for Subaru grew after she formed a relationship with him. As a result, she hates Maeki Saito and Saki being around Subaru. She looks for an excuse to make Subaru stay at school so that they can spend time together. She even gets Subaru to show her where he lives so that she can go over whenever she wants. The more time they spend together, the hornier she becomes. This is more evident near the end of the week that Subaru is left alone at home where she tries to have sex with him, whether it be at his house or at the school in the boys' restroom. At one point, she's convinced that Subaru was looking for her and was inviting her to have sex in the boys' bathroom. In her ending, she goes over to his house where she desperately tries to get inside and spends the entire night banging on his door. If Subaru doesn't run away from her, she will force her way inside his house where she has sex with him for several hours. In her bad ending, she overhears him say he wants to get away from her. In retaliation, she kills him and prepares to eat his remains, believing they will be together forever. Pigeon Blood. Hidden in a forest lies an extravagant residence. It is owned by our protagonist, known only as Chris. Chris is the latest in a family line of sex slave trainers. His latest acquisition, a girl named Rita, is to be completely trained within 6 months. Our hero is also a bit of an enigma, for he has actually lost most of his memories. However, as the training of Rita continues, he begins to slowly piece together the fragmented events of his life. Chris will occasionally get help from his two assistants, conveniently each of them embodying either sadism or masochism. Wedding Cake. Ichigo is the protagonist's blood-related younger sister. Her name was Ichigo before the start of the game, and the protagonist sometimes calls her a different name by mistake. When she evolves at the end of the game, her name is changed to Wedding Cake. She has been waiting for her brother to come home from studying in order to marry him. Shinryuku Kimi, Yakata ni Mebuku. In a world that was once peaceful, superior beings suddenly appeared. They one-sidedly massacred humans, and the world was swallowed by a whirlpool of chaos. While our heroine Mia was shopping with her family, she fell victim. With her father, mother, and older sister dead, she desperately tried to escape. But before she could, a different superior man appeared before her. Falling into desperation and prepared to die, Mia took up a knife and stabbed the man. The next second, she lost consciousness. Not knowing what had happened to her, she felt a great pain on her stomach. Upon regaining consciousness, Mia was found on a bed in a mansion. She didn't have a single wound on her body, and she was wearing a dress that didn't belong to her. In that mansion, she re-encountered that superior man. He ordered Mia to live in the villa, where he repeatedly did inhumane acts towards her. Being crushed, stabbed, shot, spilling blood, being decapitated, being eaten, being dismantled. And every time she woke up, she was on a bed in that mansion. Still without a single wound on her body, and still wearing a dress that didn't belong to her. Kurai Nichi Yubi, Sombre de Manchi. The country was shaken by a series of strange murders that happened late at night on empty streets. The killer was said to be like a modern version of Jack the Ripper, because he slashed throats and tore open stomachs. But then, after the fourth victim, the murders suddenly stopped. People wondered if the killer was afraid of getting caught or if they were planning something else. Even though the killing stopped, people couldn't forget the fear and mystery of Jack the Ripper. Now it's October, and the rainy season has started again. Our main character leads a boring life and doesn't like being around other people. One night, he has a nightmare about a big stuffed rabbit holding a huge axe. Things get even weirder for him when his mom commits suicide while listening to a sad song in the bathtub. He also learns about a classmate who only shows up on Sundays, and another student who can't run anymore because his family died. As the story unfolds, our main character finds himself caught up in a world where reality and nightmares blend together, making everything seem scarier and more confusing. Homeless Schoolgirl. A lone girl wearing a tattered school uniform lives on a dry riverbed. She can't go to school, has no house, not even a tent, just a helpless, lonely girl. She searches garbage cans for food to survive every day, and whenever she is found by vagrants or delinquents, she becomes their plaything. Gang raped, disgraced, forced to drink semen, dirtied, abused, scorned. The dark side of Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood is sent to visit her ailing grandmother, but her fate is ambiguous. She is sent to kill her grandmother with an axe, possibly due to her mother's bloodlust. If she takes the first road, she finds a flower field and kills her grandmother. If she takes the second road, she becomes lost in a labyrinth and is late to her grandmother's house. If she takes the third road, she finds a wolfman who sexually assaults her. If she takes the fourth road, she finds her grandmother alive and fine. Riding Hood asks why her ears, eyes, hands, and mouth are large, and she tells her it's because it's to better to eat her with. If she takes the fifth road, she finds a lake with 2 swans swimming. A man comes after her and tells her she has been thrown away because he paid her mother for it. She is left to cry and resigned to her fate. Potato Thriller. In Potato Thriller, players take on the role of Quindolin, the best bounty hunter around, as they navigate the dark and twisted world of the Potato Man, a notorious serial killer known for deep frying his victims. The game features constantly changing gameplay, dangerous environments, deadly enemies, and unexpected situations. Schnell Online. Described as a chat program for worldwide users, Schnell Online was strongly influenced by Worlds.com and bore a black and white doodle-like abstract art style. The game also incorporated the haunting music of the band Sutcliffe Jugan, providing a surreal and disconcerting ambience. Upon entrance of the game, players were randomly assigned one of 10 characters. These characters were permanent fixtures of a player's gaming experience, only changeable through a process ominously referred to as true death. The core allure of the game was the ability to interact with other players within this 3D realm. The primary focus of the game was user-to-user interaction, as the cited plot was intriguingly mundane. Players were tasked with acquiring a gift for their in-game girlfriend before heading to a theater. The narrative then took a radical shift with the opening of a returned gift, which was accompanied by the sudden appearance of UFOs and unknown creatures. Adding to its obscurity, Schnell Online was hosted on Freenet, an alternative to Tor, necessitating players to navigate through another game titled Carcass to locate the access codes. A 14-kilobyte beta version was briefly available, but the servers are now inactive. With little definitive information about the game, theories and rumors flourished in its wake. Allegations range from the game being exploited for illicit activities such as human trafficking and terrorism to it being haunted by an entity or used as a conduit for divine communication. Though these claims remain unverified, they contributed to the mystique that surrounds Schnell Online. Berserk. Berserk shares a rather chilling distinction of being the first known game to be blamed for an actual player's death. In January 1981, Jeff Daly, a 19-year-old Berserk player, died of a massive heart attack right after playing his favorite game. His score was 16,660, a very respectable score, but disturbing for obvious reasons. On an equally distressing note, in October 1982, 18-year-old Peter Bukowski, a physically healthy person who was alcohol-free and drug-free, inscribed his initials in Berserk's top 10 list twice in a matter of only 15 minutes. A few seconds after that, he collapsed and died of a heart attack as well. Worlds.com. Worlds.com was a popular online game that started in 1995. It was famous for letting players control their avatars and explore different virtual places. Famous people like Steven Spielberg and David Bowie liked it at first, seeing its potential for the future of the internet. But as technology improved, other games became more popular, and Worlds.com faded away. However, some strange things happened in the game. There were stories about a mysterious person called Nexialis leading players to creepy places with weird images and sounds. Some people thought Nexialis was just playing tricks, but the game became a bad place. Some players would trick others into sharing personal information, leading to real-life problems like harassment. They even put stolen photos on virtual walls. Some say there was a cult in Worlds.com, but it's not certain. JFK Reloaded. JFK Reloaded is a video game released in 2004. It's a first-person shooter that puts you in the shoes of Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of assassinating President John F. Kennedy in 1963. The game tries to recreate the events of that day in Dallas, Texas. As Oswald, you're stationed on the 6th floor of a building with a sniper rifle. Your goal is to shoot at President Kennedy's motorcade as it passes by. You earn points based on how closely your shots match the official report of the assassination. The game rewards accuracy, like hitting Kennedy in the neck, and another person in the chest with specific shots. There is also a chaos meter that measures how panicked the people in the motorcade get as you shoot at them. After each game, you can watch replays of your shots from different angles and in slow motion. The game was made by a small team who spent a lot of time researching the real event. They wanted to use the game to show that the official story of the assassination could be true, but many people found the game offensive and in bad taste. Some public figures spoke out against it, saying it was despicable. The game's creator received death threats because of it. While some praised the game's realistic physics, others felt it was disturbing to play a game where you shoot real people, especially a historical figure like President Kennedy. Despite mixed reviews, some fans even asked for a game about the death of Princess Diana. VTech Rampage. VTech Rampage is a controversial video game made by a 21-year-old named Ryan Lambourne from Australia. It's based on the 2007 shooting at Virginia Tech. The game is deliberately offensive and doesn't have any positive aspects. In the game, you play as Sung Wee Cho, the shooter. The graphics and controls are intentionally bad. You go through 3 levels, trying to kill specific people on the campus without getting caught. The game includes disturbing audio and dialogue, and it ends with Cho's suicide. After releasing the game, Lambert said he'd take it down if he got enough money and donations, but later he said it was just a joke. A version of the game without copyrighted music was made due to legal issues. The game drew comparisons to another controversial game called Super Columbine Massacre RPG. Some people criticized it, while others worried about backlash against video games. It was even ranked as one of the most evil games by GamesRadar.com. Eric Harris Doomwad. The Columbine High School shooting, which happened on April 20th, 1999, resulted in the deaths of 13 people and many more injured. The shooters were 2 seniors, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Before the shooting, Harris, who was a fan of the video game Doom, created various Doomwads, or packages of files for the game, that he shared with friends. Some of these include Thrasher.wad and RealDeath.wad. There's a quote from Harris in the Columbine report mentioning he created a level in Doom that was Columbine High School, which led to speculation that he was practicing the shooting in the game. Some believe RealDoom.wad is the level in question, but there's no evidence to confirm this, and the WAD is currently unavailable for download. Recently, on June 15, 2019, a potential lead was discovered. In one of Harris's WADs that was found, he mentions RealDoom.zip, which might be the rumored Columbine level. However, further investigation is needed to confirm this. Quest for Saddam. Quest for Saddam is a first-person shooter video game released by Petrella Entertainment on May 14, 2003. With a gameplay style similar to Doom, the goal is to fight Iraqi soldiers and eventually kill Saddam Hussein. The game was later modded by the Global Islamic Media Front, an al-Qaeda propaganda organization, in Quest for Bush, which changed the game's premise to kill the game's boss, President George W. Bush. Station.exe. When you play the game and die, it dumps a text file for coordinates in Russia somewhere near a lake. From the decade-old 4chan X threads about this game, it all goes back to a set of mega threads in 2013, when it was first found. Apparently, the one Anon who tried to go there was refused by guards or something a mile down the road, and never returned. Because of this, nobody actually bothered to try and go there again, making the entire in-person thing a complete dead end. However, inside the game also linked to a website called Semper Protonam, which was up for many years with a blank login page. Nobody could get into it though, and eventually the website went completely blank and dead with nothing in its directories. Also, the Station.exe wikia completely died too, so that wiki that discussed all the data we collected just died. It could have actually had a lot of things leading into it like an ARG, but since nobody could visit the in-real-life location or even access the Semper Protonam website, it just completely died after the initial 2014 threads on X. It just didn't receive enough attention, nor did it play out very well. And since the main website connecting the game is entirely blank now, along with anything that could have existed at that refinery or whatever in 2014, is definitely gone. It's probably dead forever. Kanye Quest 3030. Kanye West 3030, a role-playing video game launched on July 22, 2013 for Windows PCs, wasn't endorsed by Kanye West himself. Crafted in RPG Maker by artist Clara Hope, known online as Phoenix, the game melds hip-hop with science fiction in a 2D RPG format. The storyline unfolds in 2010, when Kanye West, after a mundane task of taking out the garbage, stumbles into a portal, hurling him into the dystopian world of 3030. Here, a clone of rapper Lil B reigns as a self-proclaimed deity, oppressing America. Prophecy foretells Kanye's return to topple Lil B, prompting him to join forces with fellow musicians like MF Doom, Tupac, and RZA. Their journey pits them against formidable opponents like Eminem, Nicki Minaj, and others. The Ascensionism segment within Kanye West 3030 added a layer of mystery to the game. Triggered by entering the word ascend into a dialogue box, players were transported to a clandestine area of the game. Here, the game asserted that the rest of its content was merely a facade designed to impart something beneficial. The area was filled with terminals, each requiring a specific code for completion. Should players backtrack, they'd encounter a room with a QR code, which, when pieced together from multiple screenshots, led to a website displaying only the name Phoenix Gregory in a Comic Sans font. This feature sparked theories linking it to Ascensionism, an urban legend group that emerged around the game's release. Ascensionism, purportedly a cult advocating reincarnation, was speculated to leverage Kanye Quest as a recruitment tool. Left Behind: Eternal Forces. In the single-player campaign of the game, players lead the Tribulation Force, a Christian group in post-Rapture New York City, against the global community peacekeepers, led by the Antichrist Nikolai Carpathia. They guide main characters like Rayford Steele and Chloe Steele, along with other units, aiming to convert civilians to their side rather than resorting to violence. The player's primary objective is to use conversion tactics, with lethal force only as a last resort, as excessive killing reduces the spirit level of units. If a unit's spirit level drops way too low, it may defect, leading to a potential game loss. In the multiplayer mode, up to 8 players can compete in teams, with one team as the Tribulation Force and the other as the global community peacekeepers. Despite its release, the game faced criticism from watchdog groups, including accusations of promoting religious warfare and bigotry. Disbarred attorney Jack Thompson strongly objected to the game, citing conflicts with basic Christian doctrine. Progressive Christian groups and organizations, such as the Beatitude Society and American Atheists, called for a boycott or recall, labeling it as contrary to the teachings of Jesus Christ and promoting religious intolerance. The Anti-Defamation League criticized the game for its exclusivist religious system against Jews, but acknowledged that violence is not the primary focus and conversion is depicted as non-coercive. Legal disputes arose when Left Behind Games demanded the removal of what they deemed as misleading reviews from various bloggers, threatening legal action if not complied with. Ugatsu Katan. The game Ugatsu Katan, created by Tonkin House in 1996, centers around a character who has either attempted or succeeded in suicide, only to be brought back by a ghost. Throughout the game, players encounter various Japanese settings, each depicting the story of individuals who have taken their own lives or other entities from the afterlife. While some speculate that faces depicted in the game could be those of suicide victims, this remains an unconfirmed urban legend associated with the game's themes. Roly Poly's no Nina Karobi. Roly Poly's no Nina Karobi, released in 1997 by Osamu Sato, the creator of the LSD Dream emulator game, was initially intended to help children learn new languages. However, its eerie character models and surreal aesthetic turned it into a game that evoked nightmares rather than educational experiences. Despite its cult following, the game failed to sell well due to its unsettling nature. Sato's transition from creating thought-provoking art pieces to attempting to create a children's learning game with a similarly unsettling vibe is both intriguing and somewhat amusing. Manhunt. Manhunt, developed by Rockstar North and released in 2003, follows the story of James Earl Cash, who was coerced into participating in snuff films. The game gained notoriety for its graphic execution scenes, depicted through a gritty handheld camera aesthetic reminiscent of snuff films. Although it initially received limited mainstream attention, media scrutiny intensified in 2004 after a murder in the UK was linked to the game. However, the connection was speculative, based on hearsay from the killer's friends. Despite this, Manhunt became a focal point in the debate over the influence of violent video games on children. In response to the controversy, Manhunt 2 was released in 2007, featuring even more intense violence, which further fueled the debate surrounding the series. Night Trap. Night Trap, released in 1992 for the Sega CD, utilized full-motion video, or FMV, cutscenes, a popular feature at the time. In the game, players monitor a slumber party under attack by vampires, using cameras to trigger traps and protect the girls. While the concept was innovative, the game's plot and acting were not particularly impressive. However, what stirred controversy was the game over screen, which depicted the death of a girl if the player failed. This sparked concern among parents due to the lack of a video game rating system in 1992. Consequently, Night Trap was discussed during the 1993 committee hearing on video game regulation, alongside titles like Mortal Kombat. While not disturbing by today's standards, its role in the history of media regulation remains significant. Pico's School. Pico's School, also known as Pico 1, is a point-and-click game developed by Tom Fulp and released on July 25, 1999, utilizing Flash 3 technology. It serves as the third installment in the Pico franchise and introduces the character Pico, who later became one of Newgrounds' mascots. The game's theme was inspired by school shootings, particularly the Columbine High School massacre, occurring just 3 months and 5 days before its release. In Pico's School, players control Pico as he navigates a series of challenges within a school setting. The game begins with Pico witnessing a shooting in his classroom, leading him on a mission to confront the perpetrators and save his fellow students. Throughout the game, players encounter various characters, including antagonists such as Cassandra, Alucard, Hanzo, and Nene. The gameplay involves solving puzzles, battling bosses, and making decisions that impact the outcome of the story. For instance, players must defeat Alucard by avoiding his psychic attacks and strategically timing their own offensive moves. Similarly, defeating Cassandra requires players to dodge her attacks while targeting her weak spots. Mario Kart Arcade GP. In the files for Mario Kart Arcade GP is an image of the Beslan school siege, an event that occurred during the game's development where over 1,100 people in a Russian school were taken hostage and resulting in the deaths of 333 individuals. It is titled camtest02.jpg. Perhaps it was used as a placeholder before the ability for a player to use a photo of themselves in-game was fully added. Arcade. Arcade is an indie game where you are a man desperately looking through a mall to find your kid. The very end reveals you're actually a child predator looking for a kid you've been stalking. The game was an RPG Maker indie game. You were a dad, an average-looking guy wearing glasses. You search places in a mall like an arcade and have to slide machines around like blocks to pass through. You get increasingly frantic thoughts from dad, things like, "Where could he be? I just saw him." The very end shows you cornering a kid and the camera pans menacingly as the dad smiles. Ellis Jumble. It is a very obscure, trippy point-and-click old classic Macintosh game. It is weird, full of drug references and literary references. Homenzinho. Homenzinho is a story-driven existentialist horror game from the perspective of Venezuelan President Carlos Andrés Perez, who at the time of production had been out of office for 2 years on charges of embezzlement. Through choices displayed at the bottom of the screen, the player is able to interact and speak with the Homenzinho, or Little Men, small white humanoid creatures who torment and ridicule Perez for his failed presidency. Several endings are possible, including one where Perez is impaled by a tree outside his window, and one where Perez is placed before a firing squad. Some parts of the story bear a striking resemblance to the Twilight Zone episode, The Mirror. Homenzinho is notable for its lurid depictions of gore and violence, as well as its ominous undertones and propagandistic nature. Upon initial release, several players reported epileptic fits. Gaming magazine Vida del Cartucho cited it as one of the darkest games seen in years. Despite its humorous cover, this is a game to be played in the middle of the day with the curtains open. The game was a commercial and critical failure. After distributing roughly 200 copies, 34-11 moved to a new location and has not publicly commented on the game since. Gomon Torture Master Game. In this game, you are Saddam. You got new torture tools to use in various subjects and extract sensitive information from them. This is the first game developed by Kowloon Kurosawa of Hong Kong 97 infamy. It seems there are no files of the game on the internet, but in theory, there should have been more copies of Gomon Master than Hong Kong 97. It sold well enough to make the creator a little bit of money, meaning a couple hundred copies or so, whereas there were possibly only 30 of Hong Kong 97. It's an unsatisfactory text-adventure game, with graphics and art style similar to MS Paint. Taiwan 2001. Taiwan 2001, also known as TW 2001, is an anti-Chinese game developed by Kusosoft in Taiwan. The name Kusosoft is a reference, with kuso being Japanese slang for crap, mirroring the irreverent tone of the game. Much like its predecessor, Taiwan 2001 adopts a similar gameplay style, albeit with the intention of being intentionally worse than the original. The game's premise involves a fictional scenario set in Taiwan in the year 2001. Mainland Chinese invaders are depicted as causing chaos and crime, prompting the Taiwanese government to enlist the aid of Wang Shou-min, an etiquette expert, to reform them. Meanwhile, a subplot involves the transformation of Wang Shao-en into a weapon by the Chinese Communist Party, setting the stage for the game's conflict. The game's storyline cleverly reflects real-world tensions and political complexities surrounding the dispute over Taiwan's sovereignty. It touches upon the historical context of Taiwan's separation from mainland China following the Chinese Civil War, highlighting the contrast ideologies of the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China governing Taiwan. Additionally, it alludes to the nuanced political landscape, including debates over Taiwanese nationalism and calls for independence. Characters such as Wang Xiaomin and Wang Xiaoen, though whimsically portrayed, draw inspiration from historical and cultural references. Notably, graphical assets, including backgrounds featuring figures like Sun Yat-sen, are borrowed from Taiwanese textbooks, enhancing the game's locally flavored parody. In terms of gameplay, Taiwan 2001 closely mimics the mechanics of Hong Kong 97, with players controlling Wang Xiaomin as they fend off enemies and bosses. Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. This is a creepy 3D adventure game of the same named movie. The aim of the game is to get out alive. You need to find a way back up to the surface before creep catches up with you. Click and drag the mouse in the game window to look around, and use the cursor keys to navigate around. Players would have taken the role of a character named Nigel Staniforth Smith, a wannabe rock star that has to play gigs and deal drugs to pay off a debt to a gang, the Hells Angels. If finished, it would have been an adult adventure game in the vein of Leisure Suit Larry. According to Hare, drugs were to be a core part of the gameplay, as the character Nigel has a drug problem. Drugs were quite a problem for Nigel, as he had 7 separate drug habits, all of which needed to be supported simultaneously. These drugs were core to the gameplay, as speed made the game speed up, heroin made the game slow down, acid made him see things that weren't there, and cocaine made him talk shit. Anti-Japan War Online. The Anti-Japan War Online game was developed by PowerNet Technology in cooperation with the China Communist Youth League. It began commercial operation by the end of 2005. This game is set in the historical context of the War of Resistance against Japan. It is a role-playing game. The game is part of a broader trend in China of online games based on the War of Resistance against Japan, which often reflect anti-Japanese sentiments. For instance, Resistance War Online, launched in 2007, was ranked highly in various categories in 2008 and 2009. These games are influenced by historical memories and nationalism in China, and they reflect the country's shifting power balance and assertive position in territorial disputes. The Guy Game. The Guy Game, released in 2004 for Windows, PlayStation 2, and Xbox, brought together trivia gameplay and explicit live-action footage, aiming to appeal to a male demographic. Developed by Top Heavy Studios and published by Gathering, it was the brainchild of Jeff Strangenberg, a former developer at Retro Studios known for his work on Metroid Prime. Spangenberg sought to create an interactive experience inspired by the risque content of the Girls Gone Wild series, blending trivia challenges with footage of young women in bikinis. In the game, up to 4 players could compete in rounds of trivia questions and mini-games hosted by comedian Matt Sadler. The objective was to earn points by answering questions correctly and completing challenges, with bonus points contributing to the Flashometer. This meter determined the level of censorship on footage of the bikini-clad women, gradually revealing more explicit content as players progressed. However, controversy quickly surrounded the Guy Game when it emerged that one of the participants filmed exposing her breasts was underage at the time of filming. This led to legal action against the developers and publishers, resulting in an injunction against further distribution of the game. The case raised questions about consent, privacy, and the responsibility of game developers when it comes to potentially explicit content involving minors. Despite the legal troubles and negative reception, which criticized the game's tastelessness, slow pace, and lack of substance, some reviewers saw it as a niche party game suitable for college-aged players. However, its controversial nature overshadowed any potential entertainment value it may have had, ultimately leading to its commercial disappointment and withdrawal from sale. Virtual Jihadi. Wafa Bilal's Virtual Jihadi game stirred significant controversy and legal action. Bilal, an Iraqi-American artist, created Virtual Jihadi as a commentary on the vulnerability of Iraqi civilians and to challenge stereotypes perpetuated by mainstream media and video games. However, the game, which depicted an attempted assassination of former US President George Bush, sparked widespread outrage and accusations of promoting terrorism. The controversy escalated when a public display of the game in New York was shut down by local authorities, citing code violations. This action prompted allegations of unconstitutional suppression of free speech, leading advocacy groups to challenge the closure in federal court. The Media Alliance, supported by organizations like the New York Civil Liberties Union, argued that the shutdown was unjustified and constituted an abuse of authority by Public Works Commissioner Robert Murch. They asserted that the reasons given for the closure were pretextual and aimed at silencing dissenting voices. Bilal, who had personal experience with the consequences of war in Iraq, intended Virtual Jihadi to humanize Iraqi civilians and challenge the narrative of war presented in mainstream media. He reworked an existing game, Quest for Saddam, to convey his message and provoke critical reflection on the realities of conflict. Despite Bilal's artistic intentions, Virtual Jihadi faced condemnation and accusations of glorifying violence and terrorism. The controversy extended to academic institutions, with one exhibition of Bilal's work being suspended amid accusations of promoting terrorism. Xenotake. In this game, you play as Arian, a rookie counter-alien operations squad soldier, in her first mission in enemy territory. You fight your way through hordes of sex-driven aliens and uncover the deeper mystery behind the aliens' machinations. It's a side-scrolling exploration with some shooting and dashing in between, but not really a platformer and focused on linear narrative. Sanitarium. Sanitarium is a psychological horror point-and-click adventure game developed by Dreamforge Entertainment and published by ASC Games in 1998 for Microsoft Windows. It achieved commercial success, selling around 300,000 units. The game's popularity led to its porting to iOS and Android devices in 2015. The plot centers on a man who awakens in a dilapidated sanitarium with no memory of who he is or how he got there, referred to only as Max by his fellow patients. As he explores the asylum's corridors, he finds himself transported to various surreal and disturbing locations. These include a town inhabited by malformed children, a demented circus terrorized by a squid-like creature, an alien hive, and an Aztec village devastated by the return of a god. Throughout the game, Max must uncover the truth about his past and the sinister activities of the asylum's head, Dr. Morgan, while also grappling with the death of his younger sister, Sarah. Gameplay involves solving puzzles, interacting with characters, and navigating through different levels or chapters, each with its own unique atmosphere. The game uses an isometric perspective and a non-tiled 2D navigational system, blurring the lines between reality and imagination. Players must decipher whether the worlds they encounter are real or figments of Max's mind. Sanitarium received favorable reviews for its atmospheric graphics, well-designed puzzles, and compelling storytelling. It won several awards, including Best Adventure at Computer Gaming World's 1999 Premiere Awards. Despite its critical acclaim, the game's legacy includes a failed Kickstarter project for a spiritual successor called Shades of Sanity, and comparisons to other adventure games like Stasis. In 2015, .emu released an iOS port of the game with touchscreen controls and additional features. More recently, in 2022, ScumVM added support for playing Sanitarium using the original Windows game files, expanding its accessibility to various platforms. Hello? Hell-oh? Hello, Hell-oh is an eerie indie horror game created by Ryuichi Tachibana, translated by VG Person. In this game, players take on the role of a depressed young man living in a lonely and isolated apartment, where each day feels dull and unchanging. The game employs simple controls, with players using the arrow keys to move and the spacebar to interact. With a staggering 37 different endings, the game encourages players to explore various choices and interactions to uncover the full story. Despite the repetitive nature of the protagonist's existence, the game manages to keep players engaged by gradually revealing unsettling changes within the apartment. The game's progression relies heavily on trial and error, which may not appeal to all players, but for those who enjoy unraveling mysteries and piecing together narratives, it offers a unique and tension-filled experience. The short playthroughs and compact playing area prevent replaying from feeling like a chore. The game contains mature content and is disturbing, with content warnings including jump scares and body horror. The game has received praise for its atmosphere and buildup of tension. Ihawa. In the hauntingly poignant Irish-themed flash game Ihawa, created by Terry Kavanagh and Increper, players delve into a narrative of familial dysfunction and despair. As Emer, a young girl surrounded by abusive parents, players experience the harrowing reality of her existence. From the outside, Emer faces a barrage of verbal abuse and neglect from her reprehensible parents. Insults, gendered remarks, and threats of violence are commonplace in her household. Even simple tasks like setting the table become opportunities for her parents to berate her, leaving her feeling worthless and unloved. The game's atmosphere, reminiscent of Kavanagh's eerie style, immerses players in Emer's world of isolation and despair. The chilling moment when Emer discovers her parents' bodies, victims of a murder-suicide, serves as a grim turning point. Desperate to resurrect her family, Emer embarks on a quest to match their personalities with symbolic shapes, revealing the deep-seated dysfunction within her family dynamic. The game's exploration of gender dynamics underscores themes of abuse, the devastating impact of death on a family, and the profound need for parental love and support. Emer's futile attempts to revive her family highlight her longing for acceptance and affection, even from those who have inflicted so much pain upon her. While the game offers a glimmer of hope through the kindness of a neighbor, Emer's internalized trauma and sense of worthlessness overshadow any possibility of a brighter future. Her relentless pursuit to restore her family to its former state reflects her desperate grasp on the only semblance of familiarity and belonging she has ever known. The game's refusal to allow for improvements or alterations to Emer's family dynamic speaks to the tragic inevitability of her situation. Despite the player's desire to intervene and create a happier outcome, Emer's reality remains steeped in rejection, abandonment, and abuse. In the end, Emer's fate mirrors that of her parents, lost to the darkness of despair and unfulfilled yearning. The Terrible Whiteness of Appalachian Nights. The title, The Terrible Whiteness of Appalachian Nights, sets the stage for a deeply unsettling exploration of gender abuse within the backdrop of stereotypical Appalachia. In this pixelated world, players are thrust into the role of a housewife, simply known as Kay, navigating through the mundane yet disturbing aspects of her daily life. Kay's introduction paints a bleak picture of her existence, trapped in a loveless marriage to Mark for 2 decades, with 2 children, Rose and Jack, to care for. Her words echo with loneliness and despair, as she confesses, "There's not much to do but sleep." The game's pixelated layout mirrors the bleakness of Kay's reality, with basic rooms representing her home. As players guide Kay through the house, interactions with family members are brief and devoid of meaning. Kay's presence is barely acknowledged, her actions having no impact on her family's lives. However, a stark shift occurs when the screen turns red and screams pierce the air. Suddenly, Kay's sole purpose becomes calming her screaming family members, highlighting her role as the emotional center of the household. But beneath the facade of normalcy lies a horrifying truth. As the weekend approaches, Kay is reduced to a mere object of pleasure for her husband. The game plunges players into the depths of despair as Kay is subjected to dehumanizing acts, her body reduced to nothing more than a vessel for her husband's desires. The imagery of Kay's naked, damaged body, adorned with grotesque makeup, serves as a chilling reminder of the degradation she endures. Forced into acts of submission, Kay becomes a symbol of the insidious power dynamics that pervade gender relationships, stripping her of dignity and humanity. Sonic Gather Battle. Sonic Gather Battle, a fan game inspired by the Sonic the Hedgehog series, initially received positive feedback upon its release in 2014. However, in December 2017, the game faced significant controversy due to the discovery of a DRM, or a digital rights management system, with concerning behaviors, leading to widespread disapproval within fan game communities. The DRM system implemented in the game exhibited alarming characteristics reminiscent of malware. Users reported that activating the protection was as simple as entering keywords like hack, cheat, or mod into a browser while the game was running, resulting in the browser closing abruptly. Upon activation, the game's background would change color, eerie music would play, and deadly ghost enemies would spawn within the levels, making gameplay impossible. Furthermore, escalating to the second level of protection intensified the disturbances, with the background turning red and black, accompanied by a cacophony of static noise and menacing red eyes appearing across the screen. Giant ghosts would then materialize, instantly killing the player and rendering the game unplayable. Additionally, the DRM system would track users' IP addresses and send them to an online database, ensuring that the protection would persist even if the game was reinstalled. Kill the fact. The game caused a significant uproar upon its release. In the game, players were encouraged to shoot gay and transgender characters, earning points for doing so. Disturbingly, the game even included an announcer who would declare AIDS carrier eliminated when players targeted LGBT individuals, with additional rewards for targeting transgender characters. Critics such as game reviewer Jim Sterling were deeply troubled by the game's content and questioned whether it was meant as satire and, if so, what it was satirizing. The developer, Scalded Games, defended the game, arguing that it was intended to provoke those they perceived as overly sensitive, particularly regarding LGBT issues. They expressed frustration with what they saw as an environment of excessive sensitivity and political correctness in the gaming industry. Even after the game was removed from the Steam Greenlight platform due to the backlash, Scalded Games refused to apologize. Instead, they reaffirmed their stance and stated their intention to continue creating similarly provocative content in the future. Chris Dorner's Last Stand, the Deluxe Edition. Following the events involving the killings, manhunt, and final standoff of former Los Angeles police officer Christopher Dorner, 4chan created a controversial video game titled Chris Dorner's Last Stand, a true American hero. It allows players to take the role of Dorner, and the objective is to shoot police officers, reminiscent of the 1993 first-person shooter game Doom. Set in a secluded cabin adorned with a portrait of Charlie Sheen, who had reached out to Dorner during the manhunt, the game includes former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger as one of the protagonist's enemies. However, the game is not without its controversies. It is laden with racist overtones, featuring racial epithets and stereotypes. Dorner's health regenerates by consuming buckets of fried chicken. Despite the concerns raised by the game's content, USC professor of sociology and popular culture expert Karen Sternheimer expressed limited worry, noting that user-generated games may not effectively reach a broad audience to cause significant concern among parents. She emphasized that gaming is not solely confined to young demographics, with industry data suggesting an average gamer age of 30. In Samaria. In this game, the player takes control of Roger Carnell, a man that ventured through a lot of evil in his life, starting with his babysitter molesting him sexually, his parents ignoring him and abusing him, alcoholism, bullying, and finally falling into drug abuse and then getting out of it. Having no good things or memories left in his life, an adult Roger decided to commit suicide by jumping off a roof. As he did so, he fell into a coma. During his sleep, he is encountered by a ghostly glowing energy being that welcomes him in his subconsciousness incarnate, where he has to fight his inner demons that will manifest themselves as hellish and twisted versions of worst things mankind has ever done, telling him that if he does so, he will wake up from the coma, but if he gets killed by them, he dies. Kill Switch. Kill Switch is a supposed cursed video game created in 1989 by Carvina Corporation, a Russian gaming company. Only 5,000 copies of the game were ever made, and not only that, but the game supposedly deleted all traces of itself upon completion of the game. The game was a two-dimensional horror game in which the player navigates through an abandoned coal mine whilst battling demons, either playing as Porto, a human girl, and Gast, an invisible demon, and the only character who could attack. Due to Gast's invisibility, he was much harder to play as, resulting in most players choosing Porto. Porto also had an ability, the power to change in size, but the player was unable to control this and it was seemingly random. A player identified as Porto881 has solved most of the more difficult puzzles in the game, including the final puzzle in the game in which Porto must gain the ability to control her own body's size. It is not possible to play the game and beat it as both Porto and Gast due to the game immediately deleting itself upon completion. Gast, however, has never been completed, nor has he seemed to have any influence in the game's plot with the information the players have gathered during Porto's playthrough. This piqued players' curiosities over the importance of Gast. However, it wasn't easy to beat the game as Gast. Not only had copies of the game diminished, but Gast, as mentioned before, was extremely hard to play due to being invisible. However, in 2005, a player known as Yamamoto Ryuichi had gotten his hands on the game, which might have been one of the last remaining copies. Yamamoto, aware that he was one of the only people who could have uncovered Gast's significance in the story, had took the responsibility of beating the game as Gast with the intent of recording it on YouTube. However, the only video Yamamoto had recorded was a video of him crying while staring at the character selection screen. However, in 2013, a YouTube channel known as Bartosz Chalupnik, or alternatively Gas1989, had began to upload videos of Kill Switch. Not only had he played as Porto, but he had also played as Gast, which was previously thought to be impossible, as the game deletes itself after beating it with only one character. Gas1989 was unable to provide a download link of the game as he didn't know how to copy the game. In September 7th, 2013, Gas1989 had uploaded a video claiming somebody had broken into his house and attempted to damage his copy of Kill Switch. However, they didn't succeed in completely destroying the copy, resulting in the game still being playable. During Gas1989's playthrough of Gast, he spoke of a man in a suit with a red diamond on his lapel in the description of Part 4, a red diamond being the logo of Carvina Corporation. It is also presumed that the man with the red diamond was the one who had broken into Gas1989's home. It is assumed by many that, for whatever reason, an employee of Carvina Corporation had broken into Gas1989's home with the intent of destroying his copy of Kill Switch. This is especially odd considering that Gas1989 claims that he has a father who works in Carvina Corporation. Thrill Kill. Thrill Kill was a video game for the PlayStation that got cancelled. It was supposed to come out in 1998. The game's story was about 10 people who went to hell after they died on Earth. They were forced by Maruka, the goddess of secrets, to fight each other to have a chance at coming back to life. It was designed for up to 4 players to play at the time using the PlayStation Multitap. In the game, players had a kill meter that filled up with successful attacks. Once full, they could do a special, violent move called a thrill kill. Originally, the game was going to be about a sports game called Earth Monster, but it changed into a violent, adult-themed fighting game because the publisher wanted it to be more intense. Thrill Kill was known for its sexual and violent content, and it got one of the first ever adults-only rating from the Entertainment Software Rating Board because of its violence. People who played the beta version of Thrill Kill thought it was fun, but not finished. Even though it was supposed to be published by Virgin Interactive, Electronic Arts got the rights and decided not to release it because of its graphic content. However, bootleg versions of the game still ended up online, and it became popular as a ROM. The gameplay involved up to 4 players fighting in a small 3D space. Each character had different attacks, and players had to fill up their kill meter to do a thrill kill move on another character. The game had different modes like arcade, versus, team, and training, and it had various stages where fights took place. After Thrill Kill was cancelled, the developer used its engine for other games, including the 1999 game Wu-Tang, Shaolin Style. KZ Manager. KZ Manager is a series of computer video games where players act as Nazi concentration camp commanders. They must manage various resources such as prisoners, including Jews, Turks, or Romani, poison gas, money, equipment, and public opinion on camp productivity. The goal is to keep the camp running smoothly by maintaining public opinion and other important resources above or below certain levels. For example, in one version, public opinion goes up when prisoners are executed using Zyklon B gas. However, using the gas costs money, which can be earned by making prisoners work. If too much time passes without enough executions, public satisfaction drops. Also, having too few working prisoners leads to resource shortages and the camp closing, resulting in losing the game. Prisoners need to be bought, and the bodies of deceased prisoners must be disposed of, which also costs money. Like other resource management games, the aim is to find a balance between expenses, income, actions, and production goals. However, KZ Manager has a controversial theme due to its focus on concentration camps. In 1991, the New York Times reported that KZ Manager was one of around 140 games with similar themes. Austrian newspapers mentioned that a survey found many students were aware of these games. KZ is short for concentration camp in German. Custer's Revenge. Custer's Revenge, also known as Mystique Presents Swedish Erotica Custer's Revenge, is a controversial adult action game released for the Atari 2600 in November 1982. It sparked outrage due to its premise of sexually assaulting a Native American woman tied to a post. The game features a character based on Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, known for his defeat at the Battle of Little Bighorn. After the Christmas season of 1982, the game's rights were sold to PlayAround, an adult video game company. PlayAround rebranded the game as Westward Ho for the European market, making slight modifications like darkening the skin tone of the Native American woman. Gameplay involves controlling Custer as he navigates through arrows to reach the woman and engage in the act of sexual assault. The game offers single-player and multiplayer modes, with obstacles like cacti added in some modes. Critics universally panned Custer's Revenge, labeling it as one of the worst video games ever made. It was developed hastily as part of the Swedish Erotica series to capitalize on the lack of adult content in video games. The game's racist and sexist themes were chosen deliberately to generate controversy and publicity. Upon release, the game faced intense criticism from women's rights and Native American groups. Some jurisdictions, including Los Angeles County and Suffolk County, New York, attempted to ban the game. However, despite the backlash, the game sold approximately 80,000 copies before being withdrawn from circulation in April 1983. Over the years, Custer's Revenge has continued to be condemned for its offensive content. It has been cited as one of the most racist and disturbingly sexual video games ever made. Witch's Heart. Witch's Heart is a story-focused game with light action elements developed by IZ Blue Star Entertainment, using RPG Maker 2000. The game follows Claire Elford, a young woman trapped in a cursed mansion along with 4 others. Over the course of the 5 days, the group must find a way to escape the mansion, uncovering its secrets and discovering the truth about the legendary wish-granting treasure, The Witch's Heart. The game contains dark themes, including murder, suicide, and self-harm. It also mentions abuse of young girls in an optional scene. Dreaming Mary. Dreaming Mary is an indie side-scrolling horror adventure RPG game created by Acha. It was released on April 17, 2014. Mary is a girl who loves to dream. In fact, she loves to dream so much she can spend an entire day dreaming. One day, when she falls asleep, she finds herself in a nostalgic place very different from her other dreams. Everyone there knows her and treats her like an old friend, and they invite her to play with them or help them. When she finishes all of their tasks, she is invited deeper into the dream. The game, despite its initial innocently cute visuals and music, does feature disturbing content later on. The game's themes include the exploration of real-life problems, such as sexual abuse and isolation, as well as the desire to escape from a mundane reality. The story has multiple endings, depending on the player's choices and actions throughout the game. Bloodwash. The game starts with a college student named Sarah, who needs to do her laundry for a job interview. Her washing machine is broken, so her neighbor suggests a laundromat, but warns her about a dangerous person called the Womb Ripper. Sarah takes the bus to the laundromat and encounters a creepy person who knows she's pregnant. At the laundromat, Sarah does her laundry and explores nearby stores. She learns about a fire at an old laundromat and a missing woman named Samantha Rhodes. Strange things start happening, like creepy phone calls and a dead employee. Sarah tries to call the police, but the call gets cut off. Later, Officer Burton arrives at the laundromat but encounters weird things, like a naked person with a bloody fetus. He tries to escape through vents but gets killed by the Womb Ripper. Sarah realizes no one is coming to help, so she tries to escape. She witnesses the Womb Ripper killing someone and finds herself trapped inside the laundromat. She discovers a secret door to the old laundromat and finds disturbing things, like missing persons posters and dead bodies. Sarah finds a gun and confronts the Womb Ripper, who turns out to be Samantha Rhodes. Samantha survived a fire but lost her child and went on a killing spree targeting pregnant women. Sarah kills Samantha in self-defense. Fragile. Fragile is a 2D adventure game with a hand-drawn aesthetic, reminiscent of titles like Limbo or Little Nightmares. Developed by Beer Night Studio, the game puts players in control of a young girl trying to escape from her criminal abductors, delving into themes of organized crime, human trafficking, child abuse, and organ harvesting. One of Fragile's standout features is its unflinching portrayal of real-world horrors, presenting shocking and brutal scenes meant to provoke discomfort and reflection. The game doesn't shy away from depicting the protagonist's vulnerability, with death animations meant to emphasize the gravity of the situations she faces. The review suggests that Fragile challenges the typical escapism of horror games by confronting players with the darker aspects of reality. However, it also raises questions about the ethics of using genuine human suffering as entertainment and whether the game veers into tasteless exploitation. Damage, the sadistic butchering of humanity. Damage, the sadistic butchering of humanity is a violent game where you explore a city and kill people. You start with a baseball bat, but can find more weapons as you go. Some drugs make your character stronger. The game is for adults and has a lot of blood and gore. There's no story or set path to follow. It's reminiscent of Grand Theft Auto, but in 2D. Each level is made up of different screens with small people and objects. Technically, the game is well made. The pixel art looks great and the animations are smooth. There's no music, but the sound effects are good. Endroll. Endroll is a freeware game developed by Sagawa using RPG Maker 2000, released on June 2, 2016. It offers players a story-driven adventure RPG experience with turn-based battles. The game's narrative centers around a young boy named Russell Seeger, who finds himself on death row. In an experimental procedure, he injects himself with a drug called Happy Dream, which leads him into a dream world for 7 consecutive days. In this dream world, Russell resides in a town known as Nameless Town. Each day in this dream world is filled with exploration and interactions with other characters. However, beneath the seemingly pleasant exterior lies darker and more sinister truths about the other residents, Russell's own past, and the true intentions behind the experiment. Endroll is rated R15 by the creator due to its heavy themes and portrayal of self-discovery in the face of hopelessness. It delves into psychological and existential themes, offering players an emotionally impactful experience. Viewer or player discretion is advised due to the game's mature content. Polybius. Polybius is a legendary arcade game that supposedly emerged in several suburbs of Portland, Oregon in 1981. According to the urban legend, the game was exceptionally popular and addictive, leading to long lines of eager players and even fights over who would play next. Allegedly, mysterious men in black visited the machines to collect unknown data, purportedly related to the game's psychoactive effects on players. Players who engaged with Polybius reportedly experienced a range of unpleasant side effects, including seizures, amnesia, insomnia, night terrors, and hallucinations. Approximately a month after its supposed release, Polybius vanished without a trace, with all arcade machines disappearing from the market. The legend attributes the game's creation to a company called Sinnesschlossen, a term that roughly translates to sense delete in German. However, the legitimacy of this company and the game itself has been widely disputed, with many regarding Polybius as a hoax. Despite the lack of evidence supporting its existence, Polybius has persisted as a notable urban legend, inspiring various adaptations, including video games and even a movie. The story has sparked curiosity and speculation, with some suggesting it may have originated from a combination of real events, such as instances of players falling ill after extended gaming sessions and fictional elements. Garage: Bad Dream Adventure. The point-and-click game, directed by Tomomi Sakba, features bizarre, surreal, often nightmarish, as the title implies, and sometimes graphic imagery. The player controls a small alien-like robot, maneuvering their way through a barren, foreboding landscape of cracked wood paneling and old, rusting machinery, complete with creepy, lifeless faces. The eerie background music, or lack thereof at times, only adds to the sense of impending danger, making for a very unsettling atmosphere. It was a Japanese exclusive with a very limited physical run, of only about a few thousand copies ever made. Sometimes you can even find auctions going for it. There was some news in 2020 that it was finally going to be released in English as a mobile version, but this still remains to be seen. Rape Day. Rape Day was an indie adult visual novel developed by Deskplant and slated for release in April 2019. However, the game faced significant controversy and was ultimately cancelled before it could be launched. The premise of the game revolved around a serial killer and rapist navigating a zombie apocalypse, where players could control the protagonist's actions, including harassment, sexual assault, and murder of women. Development of Rape Day involved the creation of branching dialogues and 3D rendered scenes, with over 7,000 words and 500 images reportedly included in the game. The developer, known as Deskplant, described the game as a dark comedy inspired by horror and psychological thrillers. Despite warnings about mature content, including sexual assault, necrophilia, and incest, the game's Steam page generated significant backlash for its portrayal and apparent promotion of sexual violence against women. Online petitions urging the removal of Rape Day garnered widespread support, with one petition amassing over 128,000 signatures. Politicians and advocacy groups called for government intervention and review of the game's development process. Valve, the company behind Steam, faced criticism for initially allowing the game's distribution on its platform, leading to a statement announcing the game's removal due to unknown costs and risks. Valve's decision was met with mixed reactions, with some praising the move as necessary to combat harmful content, while others criticized it as censorship. Deskplant expressed plans to distribute the game independently, citing differences in vision between the developer and Steam's distribution policies. Chiller. Chiller is a light gun arcade game released in 1986 by Exidy. It garnered attention for its controversial and graphic content, prompting discussions about violence in video games. The game centers on the player assuming the role of an unseen torturer tasked with inflicting harm on restrained NPCs across various dungeon settings. Gameplay in Chiller revolves around 4 main levels: the torture chamber, the rack room, the haunted house hallway, and the graveyard. The player's objective is to cause the death of NPCs as quickly as possible, with the challenge lying in finding ways to activate medieval torture devices to achieve quicker and bloodier deaths. Additionally, there is a target practice bonus round where players shoot objects traveling at high speeds. While the first 2 levels feature human NPCs restrained by torture devices, later levels transition into traditional shooting gameplay, where players must fend off paranormal creatures like zombies, ghosts, and mummies. Despite its unique gameplay mechanics, Chiller faced criticism for its senseless violence and graphic portrayal of torture. It sold poorly in the United States, with arcade owners refusing to purchase it due to its controversial content. However, Exidy found success marketing the game to third world countries. Muhammad's Sex Simulator 2015. The release of Muhammad's Sex Simulator 2015 has sparked significant controversy within the network and beyond. The game, created by Gizmo01942, allows players to control a character representing Muhammad, engaging in sexual acts with both men and animals. The title of the game itself is highly inflammatory, as it not only trivializes the religious figure of Muhammad, but also sexualizes him in a disrespectful manner. The use of Muhammad's image in such a context is deeply offensive to many, particularly within the Muslim community. The creator of the game says they didn't mean to make fun of Muhammad or offend anyone's beliefs, but putting him in a sexual game suggests otherwise. The depiction of Muhammad in video games is not unprecedented, but the portrayal in Muhammad's Sex Simulator 2015 crosses a line into offensive and inappropriate territory. Dustmania Grotesque. Dustmania Grotesque is a type of game called Guro Hentai, which means it's pornographic and involves really disturbing and violent stuff, such as dismemberment, removal of body organs. The story of the game is about a female scientist named Chiharu, who gets kidnapped by her former colleague and his assistant. They plan to test out a drug by doing terrible things to her in their lab. The scientist is crazy, but it seems like he has a softer side. His assistant seems like a typical airhead, but she's hiding some creepy secrets. And Chiharu herself is not just a helpless victim. She can get pretty aggressive under certain conditions. The game is very short. You can finish the whole thing in less than 5 hours, and most of that time is spent on really graphic sex scenes. It feels as if they rushed the game out without giving it the depth it needed. And the artwork in the game is just not good. And there are many mistakes, like the guy's private parts disappearing in some scenes. Dual Phase Sukakuru. The story follows twin sisters, Nozomi and Kanami, who love having sex with each other. As the scenes progress, they experiment with toys and things get more intense, leading to 5 different endings. The game has an enforced play order, spanning 3 playthroughs. The first 2 playthroughs are pretty much the same, but from different perspectives. The third playthrough has different endings depending on choices, but it still recycles the same scenes until the end. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the scenes. They explore various yuri fetishes, but cross the line with some pretty unrealistic scenarios. The artwork suffers too, especially in later CGs. The English patch for the game was released in 2009, but it's a challenge to find due to copyright issues. Mugen Renkan. The protagonist lived in a world with a strict and ever-present class system. She was the slave of a deformed, vulgar master and endured his mental and physical abuse each and every day. However, she accidentally received eternal life from the king of their world and was stripped of what little rights remained to her. The people descended upon her with cruelty and malice. They played with her, knowing that she could not die. The protagonist wanted to be free of such an eternity, but could not even commit suicide. However, someone told her that if she killed the king, she could also die. She attempted such a murder, failed, and had to escape from the town, with her pursuers hot on her heels. An unfathomable length of time would then pass in which she would meet other people and have to part from them. Shitai wo Arau. Yasuka, a struggling student aspiring to become a doctor, faced a setback when he lost his part-time job at a university hospital. The vice director, Suyuzaki Chegusa, offered him a unique opportunity to continue working there: corpse washing. This task, unfamiliar to those outside the medical field, involves cleansing deceased bodies. Through this work, Yasuka would gain first-hand experience and undergo a profound mental transformation. It was a stark departure from his normal life, pushing him into an unfamiliar realm where his understanding of life and death would be profoundly challenged. This process of corpse washing would not only test Yasuka's resilience, but also alter his perception of the world around him. Nyotai Kyoran. The main heroine is diagnosed with a terminal disease and undergoes monstrous bodily modification in order to be cured. This premise exists just to cram in as many weird situations as possible. Depending on the ending, Saya sometimes dies from her condition, and sometimes it turns out it was just a hoax by Sakaki, the doctor, who wanted a guinea pig. In terms of audio, the game relies heavily on Saya's screams, which can become overwhelming due to their frequency. While the voice actress does a commendable job, the constant screaming may become tiresome for some players. The premise serves as a vehicle for exploring various bizarre situations, ranging from unexpected genital attachments to connections to alternate dimensions. The game covers a wide range of fetishes, but notably avoids graphic violence. The game also takes care in showing the progression of events, from Saya being freaked out by her new body to gradually accepting and ultimately embracing it. The art is somewhat lacking, with off-model drawings and odd expressions detracting from the overall experience. Despite this, the game still manages to provide an intriguing and varied set of scenes. The Void. The Void, also known as Tension or Type Prop in Russian, is a first-person adventure game developed by Icepick Lodge and initially released in 2008. The game presents a unique and surreal world called The Void, which serves as a purgatory-like realm where color, a valuable liquid representing life force, is scarce. Players assume the role of a lost soul navigating this enigmatic landscape, interacting with its inhabitants, the sisters and brothers, two opposing factions. The sisters are depicted as beautiful naked beings, while the brothers are monstrously deformed. Color functions as the player's health, armor, stats, and ammo, making it a crucial resource. The player's ultimate goal is to escape the void and be reincarnated on the surface, posing as one of the brothers and eventually confronting them. Throughout the game, players encounter various brothers, each with distinct appearances and characteristics. Depending on the player's actions, brothers may act aggressively, be unsure, or even sympathetic towards the protagonist. The game incorporates strategic elements, with players managing resources and navigating different domains and chambers within the void. Skin. This is the weirdest game on this list. The game's website talks about this disturbing obsession with the physicality and aesthetic appeal of human skin, depicting an unsettling fixation on its texture, appearance, and vulnerability. The language used is evocative, as it talks about predatory desire for the skin's smoothness, warmth, and flawless complexion. It also talks about a preserved pleasure derived from envisioning the act of caressing, kissing, and embracing it, with an emphasis on savoring every moment of contact. The text intensifies as they describe their fantasies of entwining their own skin with that of another, blurring the boundaries between self and other in a grotesque display of possession. As it progresses, it takes a darker turn, with graphic descriptions of inflicting wounds and drawing blood, revealing a disturbing willingness to harm and to face the very object of their desire. The language becomes more visceral, detailing the act of biting into the skin, tasting its essence, and reveling in its exquisite flavor, all while disregarding any semblance of empathy or concern for the skin's well-being. The gameplay of this game is just text which talks about how you will create the perfect female, and how skin is impure and must be cleaned. Feed the Hole. Feed the Hole plunges players into the twisted mindset of Billy, a deranged killer driven by the insatiable hunger of a flesh-eating hole in his closet. The game unfolds across 3 chilling scenarios, each starting with Billy awakening in his bed, donning his clown mask, and arming himself with a revolver before setting out in his car. In the first scenario, Billy lurks near a gas station, preying on a woman using a payphone before disposing of her body to feed the hole. The second scenario finds Billy stumbling upon a campsite, where he ruthlessly slaughters 3 unsuspecting victims, their remains destined for the same grim fate. Lastly, Billy invades a home, murdering its inhabitants and adding them to his macabre collection. As the bodies disappear into the void, a grotesque, flesh-like goat emerges, signaling the completion of Billy's grisly task. Black Pill Bill. The plot of Black Pill Bill, God's Work, revolves around the protagonist Bill, an ordinary American man with traditional values, who loses his job due to what he perceives as the push for diversity in his workplace. Feeling marginalized and disenfranchised, Bill decides to take matters into his own hands and fight back against what he sees as an encroachment on his way of life. As the game unfolds, players follow Bill's journey as he engages in violent confrontations against various groups he views as representative of the forces of diversity, including LGBTQ individuals, people of different races, and those with alternative lifestyles. These confrontations often involve melee combat against enemies, such as crazy doctors, community college students in gender studies programs, and patrons of rainbow-themed nightclubs. The game incorporates themes of racism, homophobia, and anti-Semitism, portraying Bill as a vigilante hero, taking a stand against what he perceives as threats to his values and way of life. The title Black Pill Bill itself is a reference to the Black Pill ideology, which promotes beliefs about attractiveness and relationships. Hypno-training my mother and sister. Hypno Training My Mother and Sister is a Japanese adult visual novel which follows Minoru Morimoto, a jaded young man who comes to resent his mother Chikako and his sister Saki when he realizes that they only show him any approval when he does well at school and treat him like trash the rest of the time. To get revenge on his family, Minoru comes up with the twisted idea to make them into his sexual playthings using hypnosis. After discovering a hypnosis method on the internet, Minoru tests it on Chikako and Saki and finds that it works better than he could have ever imagined. There they were, Minoru's mother and sister, servicing him against their will. Even his sister, who loathed her older brother, who resisted with all her heart, couldn't stop her body from obeying her brother's orders after he had cast his hypnosis on her. There you go. These were 100 of the most disturbing video games I could find. I'm going to post more videos like this one on the channel, if that's what you are into. Hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.